Welcome everyone to a lecture on the question whether Heidegger was a Luddite, a technophobe, whether he despised technology, whether there's something else going on in Heidegger's question after technics. I will be reading a chapter from my book Heidegger on Death and Being, published by Springer in 2021. I will link to the book in the description of this video. And in the description you also find a link to my course on Heidegger. So if you'd like to study Heidegger more closely, just follow that link and you'll learn more. And as always, just to mention this, I'm a free scholar. That means I have no academic affiliation, and my work here is made possible by the generous donations from the public, the viewers. So thank you very much for that. There are several links down there in the description as well where you can support what I'm doing here and help me keep going. So I'll start reading now. Contrary to a common misconception, Heidegger's critique of technology is not an exercise in cultural pessimism, nor is he a banal technophobe, as some have argued. By the way, mostly German commentators. Dreyfus and Davies and Andrew Mitchell have argued against the standard reading of Heidegger as a Luddite. Heidegger himself was well aware that his concerns with technology caused distress. In a documentary film from 1970, the filmmaker Richard Visser asks Heidegger how he would respond to those who find his criticism of technology to cause severe headaches, or to cause Kopfzerbrechen, a breaking, a bursting of the head. The German idiom, jemandem Kopfzerbrechen bereiten, to give someone a headache, means, however, in a metaphorical sense, to make someone think profoundly after some issue or phenomenon. This can cause a healthy worry with the inquirer. Heidegger responds to Visser, I find Kopfzerbrechen, a headache, a certain breaking of the head, very healthy. People do not at all worry enough. There is today even a great thoughtlessness that goes together with the forgetfulness or the forgetting of being. End of quote. And these are my translations here. For Heidegger, today's thoughtlessness is tantamount to an ingratitude for the gift of thinking. This ingratitude, this lack of thankfulness, is a most pressing danger, which is to say that we interact with technology without asking properly where it comes from and hence where it might be going. Heidegger then adds something crucial. Here's a long quote from this conversation with Richard Visser. Heidegger says, I am not against technology. I have never spoken against technology, nor against the so-called demonic nature of technology. I rather try to understand the essence of technology, or as I translated, the realm of technics. I see in technology, in its realm, that human beings stand under a power that challenges them and in which human beings are no longer free. That something announces itself here, namely a relation between being and human being, and that this relation, which hides itself in technology, one day comes to light. Thus, I see in the coming realm of technics the first appearance of a much deeper goings-on, which I call Ereignis. This is a dense summary of Heidegger's thoughts on technology and the tidings of being. The first thing to notice is that he refers to the Ereignis because in technology we can see being's self-reduction, a simultaneous withdrawal of a world that once has been and a world that is to come. We can see in the diagnosis of techniques an epochal shift and transition that affects all beings. In the Identity essay, we find a crucial statement by Heidegger in this regard. He writes, quote, the modern world of technology is a prelude of what is called Ereignis. The Ereignis is the realm where being and humans can encounter each other such that the currently unchecked prevalence of techniques is gotten over and transformed into a healthier relationship of human being and techniques. This happens through the thinking of the Ereignis, where the first beginning is involuntary withdrawal. The other beginning takes concealment into consideration and properly focuses on the dimension of withdrawal, and thereby, or let's say, the dimensions with which withdrawal discloses or opens up, and thereby initiates another beginning. Technology is the fate of metaphysics insofar as metaphysics wants to keep beings in sheer presence and availability and forgets non-availability. With the thinking of the event, another dimension is all of a sudden at stake, and from that dimension another relationship with techniques becomes possible. Secondly, Heidegger is not against technology, as he says. Heidegger understands that an antithetical stance requires one to embrace, in fact, what one is against. At worst, this leads one to be consumed by what one despises most. A proper response to techniques, Heidegger says in the Country Path Conversations and Gelassenheit, is a simultaneous yes and no to technology. We can allow technological tools into our homes, but we ought not to let them take over those homes. Thirdly, for Heidegger, technology cannot be demonic in neither a Christian nor a Greek sense, since technology is an essential occurrence of being, and being is not some demonic force that takes possession of us. Fourthly, technology overpowers the human being in such a way that the human being is no longer free. This overpowering goes together with the simultaneous seeming that techniques give the greatest powers to the human being. Fifthly, Heidegger here says that techniques goes together with the forgetting of being. The abandoning, however, also indicates a possible returning of being, i.e. a turning of being's prevalent way of occurring. But differently, being as Gestell already indicates other possibilities of how beings can occur. The withdrawal of being is greatest in techniques, but this intensification of withdrawal, of truth, of being, of a genuine intensity, is precisely what primes the return of being already. If mortals, however, they have to properly respond. The open of being, into which human beings are thrown in each epoch, is not one-dimensional. Being moves in tidings and echoes, insofar as both withdrawal and relation and also grasping and taking take place at once. Being's dimensions and tidings occur as sfumato, blending into one another. Thus, in the moment of being's greatest abandoning, its return is already enshrined, but not guaranteed, for it requires the help of its shepherd, the human being. This is precisely also why techniques has to work against the being of human. And this is also not to say that we should abandon technology, because the will to overcome technology is what characterizes that will itself. So that would itself become a technical will. It would be a technocratic solution, if you like, to the problem of technology, which simply exacerbates the issue. Concerning to think of or regarding technology as demonic and willfully attempting to overcome it would mean to misunderstand what Heidegger is trying to tell us about the essence of technology. Heidegger therefore speaks of a Verwindung des Gestells rather than of overcoming technology. Verwinden, to get over or to overturn, means to let arise out of positionality another possibility of world encounter, not against it, but from within it. From within with it, but tweak it, let's say, intensifying its weaknesses. This encounter he calls fourfold. But this does not do away with positionality. The fourfold is only possible as long as positionality is possible. Getting over is then an internal rather than an external approach. Getting over, overturning, refers to another beginning, possible out of that which is. Getting over or overturning is not purely human and not initiated by the human being willfully, but is still co-constituted by human responses and only possible thanks to them. The most important aspect of Heidegger's remark to Richard Visser, the documentary filmmaker, then is that in technics as Gestell, another relation between being and human being, that means another beginning, is already showing itself as opening up and possible. Nevertheless, technology, especially in its current and apparently unquestioned occurring, is a threat to human beings, of course, and to our world, to our human world. Technology and technocracy challenge humans, and they could enslave us. Heidegger writes, human beings do not control technology. They are at its mercy. They are its toys, he actually says, Spielwerk. In that respect, modern human beings are a slave to their forgetfulness of being. End of quote. This is the crossroads in Heidegger's Si Ça Set. Either we move further into the sphere of machines, or we move towards the fourfold. Technology itself is not to be stopped. Once unleashed, once the atomos has become divisible, there is nothing to stop technics, because now a sheer endless amount of energy stands ready for a continuous increase of energy that only serves to exploit nature as a gas station further. This trajectory set in when the human being began to revolt against being at the dawn of modernity. In the so-called history of metaphysics, this is most notably visible when Descartes posits being as the object posited by the subject, as Heidegger points out in a seminar held in 1951 in Zurich. As argued, he argues that the critique of Descartes is something that's there in Heidegger from the beginning, and it's the revolution is the ego cogito sum. It's an articulation of the human revolt against being. It's I that through my thinking posit my being or being itself without questioning being any further. This revolution, of course, this is not a personal decision by Descartes. This is a logical possibility, a hypothesis that is drawn out from, say, nature or being itself, but at the same time it's a revolt against it also, because it now sets in is the capacity to posit through the categories how something is supposed to or ought to appear. The revolution even allows to posit the human being purely according to their genome. Once the genome has been decoded, there is nothing to stop the artificial production. That means the positing of human beings, just in the way that they are required. And so there's the beingness of the human being is posited as the data of the information, the genetic information, which then is used to produce human beings artificially as according to the demands of, say, the market. Once the genome has been decoded, this can be done. Heidegger is fully aware of that. So this reification of the human being leads to just that. So here he tells the documentary filmmaker Richard Visser, this is again a quote from the film which I translated, in the foreseeable future, we will be capable of producing humans purely according to their organic nature, just as we require them, skilled and unskilled, intelligent and stupid. It will come that far. It is no coincidence that human beings must also make themselves a resource. Human beings are even the most important resource because they belong to the dimension of being qua Gestell. And that is to say, we carry out the sendings of being. Gestell needs humans, requires humans to enforce its will. It is for the essential relation between being and human that human essence is the most open to the attacks of Gestell. Hence, if we follow Heidegger here closely, then any willful act over or against being, qua techniques, qua Gestell and framing, positionality, leads to unintended consequences. To being itself subjecting the human, i.e., to consequences mortals cannot possibly hope to be able to see in full and with all their ramifications. In a paper defending Heidegger's stance technology, Dreyfus Haynes points out, Hubert Dreyfus, that Heidegger's concern with technology is ontological, but not a humanist critique of techniques or a pessimistic view of the world. Dreyfus writes, the danger then is not the destruction of nature or culture, but the restriction in our way of thinking, a leveling of our understanding of being. To some degree, yes. So Heidegger himself says this, the human being today is on the run from thinking, is running away from thinking. So yes, we can agree to some degree with Dreyfus that Heidegger is neither a humanist nor a pessimist or anything on any of these isms. James Dembski pointed out that for Heidegger, this is a quote from Dembski, humanistic subjectivism is the greater threat to mankind than technology. And this is precisely because humanistic subjectivism is the hubris of the human being to assume absolute power over history and the world. And I also agree with Hubert Dreyfus that Heidegger aims to provide an opening for a free relationship with technology. Heidegger explicitly does not want to purport that, quote, fate means the inevitableness of an unalterable course. Heidegger does not think that this is the case. Here is at least one way out. There is at least one way out in his response and in the fourfold, for example. But I disagree very strongly with Dreyfus that Heidegger only worries about our so-called understanding of being, as if Dasein were still at the center. This is where Dreyfus just loses it. So there's a neglection there's a neglect of the ramifications of the turning in Heidegger's thinking. There's something much more profound at stake. For Heidegger, being itself is at work, and thus the way we respond to this challenge must be more profound than any kind of a pragmatic stance and a new way of ritualizing ourselves. And Dreyfus gives the example of drinking tea like the Japanese, but we cannot simply adopt some other culture here in the West, some so-called other culture, and I say scare quote culture, because that already indicates that this is just in the way that we look at it, it's just a product, right? We cannot fully integrate to something else, and we're just basically, this is just another form of technology, of technocracy. And walking into a metaphysical supermarket, getting out whatever we want, and then recombining and rehashing, integrating, as they say now, everything into one soup, one melting soup of nothingness, which isn't our own. We have to own what is ours, what is our fate. We can learn from another house of being, but we cannot fully become an other. So we cannot mimic another way of being, as it were. The question is much deeper. How must we now think? That is the essential question. Not how should we act. How must we think? Quote from Heidegger, so long as we do not, through thinking, experience what is, we can never belong to what will be. And what we are witnessing is the gigantomachia paritis usias, as Heidegger says in the first page of Being in Time, the gigantic battle for being. War is the father of everything, as Heraclitus says, and this war is now raging visibly. And it is upon the few and rare to throw something, pro ballo, into the future for opening up twists and strives and cliffs and edges where other horizons can arise and emerge. So no, Heidegger is no Luddite. He is not against technology, because being against technology would mean to be dependent upon it, to need it, to require it for your so-called identity. Heidegger wants to understand what realm technics opens up and what this means for the human being, and how within this realm, but also without it, because it is only seemingly exclusive and seemingly all-powerful, and that seeming gives us hints, how that we can still, in a playful manner, be free in our relationship with techniques and within techniques. Thank you very much for listening. As always, please support the channel in any way you can. If you'd like to study Heidegger more closely with me, then follow the link in the description for my Heidegger courses. And if you could, please leave a comment, like the video, and also share it. That would help me a lot as well. Thank you very much indeed.